Chosen ones, wait until you hear this. It changes everything. What if everything they told you about yourself was a lie? What if the reason your life has felt so heavy was because you were chosen? And what if the most dangerous thing in this world isn't a weapon, but a chosen one who finally remembers? They didn't wait until you were grown. They hit you when you were still soft, when you didn't have the words, when you couldn't fight back. The nightmares, the chaos, the way you always felt watched, it wasn't your imagination, it was surveillance. You were marked. You were the quiet kid that questioned everything, even when nobody else dared. The one who felt too much, saw too deep, couldn't blend in no matter how hard you tried. You were different, and they noticed. You weren't just born, you were deployed, and like Moses, hidden in a basket, they tried to drown your destiny before it ever reached the riverbank. Like David, you were underestimated, until the day the giant looked up and saw the one thing it feared most: remembrance. They tried to break you early, not because you were weak, but because they could feel it. That spark in your soul, that signal, the light you didn't even know you carried was already shaking their systems. And so they whispered, "You're too intense, you're overthinking, you need to be realistic." But beneath every rejection, every betrayal, every breakdown, the truth was echoing. You are not broken. You are becoming. Let me ask you something real. If this world was built to keep you asleep, why is it that you have always struggled to stay numb? Why do you keep getting back up when others would have stayed down? Why does your heart still burn in the middle of the ashes? Here's the truth they never wanted you to hear. You weren't losing your mind, you were shedding their programming. In Scripture, Paul was blinded before he could finally see. Jesus was rejected before he resurrected. Every chosen one walks through fire, not because they are cursed, but because the fire burns off what doesn't belong. So now I'll ask you, what if you were never meant to fit in, because you were designed to break the mold? What if you were never abandoned, just hidden until the time was right? And what if this moment, right now, is not just coincidence, but the exact moment you were meant to wake up? You're not going crazy, you're remembering, and when a chosen one remembers, everything begins to burn. The war you never knew you were in. Have you ever wondered why life hit you harder than others? Why you've been betrayed by the very people you trusted most? And why, no matter how much you try to be normal, something somewhere always drags you back into the fire? Let me tell you something that most people don't even dare to whisper. You are not being punished. You're being targeted, but not in the way you think. This isn't about karma. This isn't about bad luck. This is about energy, divine energy that threatens everything false, and that energy lives inside you. Since you were a child, you've felt it, that eerie sense that people were reacting to something about you that even you couldn't see. The bullying wasn't random. The family dysfunction wasn't coincidence. The rejections, the betrayals, the gaslighting, that wasn't just life being hard. That was strategy. They saw your light long before you ever did, and they attacked, not because of who you were, but because of what you were activating. There's a war happening around you that you were never taught to recognize. A silent war, spiritual, psychological, energetic. You see, darkness doesn't fear darkness, but it panics when light begins to remember itself. The enemy doesn't wage war with bullets anymore, not on chosen ones. It wages war with patterns, with trauma, with manipulation so subtle you don't even realize you're being dismantled from the inside out. They isolate you, make you question your intuition. They plant people in your life who pretend to love you, only to slowly erode your self-worth. They engineer delays, confusion, shame, not to destroy your potential, but to block your activation. Because when a chosen one activates, systems start to collapse. Let's go back to the book of Job. He didn't lose everything because he was weak. He lost everything because he was marked. Satan said, "Let me test him. Let me break him. Let me make him curse God and himself." But Job didn't fold. And neither did you. Even when you lost everything, even when depression had you curled up in the dark, even when you were screaming to the sky, asking, "Why me?" something in you didn't die. That's not normal. That's divine design. Let me ask you something deeper. Why do you think it's been this relentless? Why has your battle felt like a life sentence while others breeze through life untouched? Here's the answer. They're not fighting you, they're fighting what you carry. And the more you rise in truth, the more hell shakes. That's why your heartbreak hit harder, why the betrayals cut deeper, why your healing took longer. Because the more you alchemize pain into purpose, the closer you get to the one thing they fear most, remembrance. Let me be blunt. The moment you fully remember who you are, their illusion collapses. That's why your spiritual attacks intensified right before your breakthrough. Because, even in silence, your light is a weapon, and every time you choose truth over fear, their program glitches. That's not paranoia, that's perception sharpening. They didn't want you to see the truth, because the moment you do, you become unstoppable. You've been asking the wrong question. Why is this happening to me? The real question is, what am I carrying that scares them this much? Think about it. You've survived things people don't walk away from, and somehow you still feel everything. That's not weakness, that's signal. Jesus didn't get crucified for being popular. He was crucified because his presence made the empire tremble. Not just his words, but what his presence activated. Same blueprint, different battlefield. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be a frequency. And frequencies don't need applause, they need alignment. So if your entire life has felt like resistance, maybe it's not because you're off path. Maybe it's because you're walking right through the battlefield, and they're throwing everything at you to make you forget who you are. But it's not working anymore, is it? You're starting to feel it. The crackling beneath your skin, the fire in your belly, the knowing in your chest. That's not ego. That's memory. So let me leave you with this. They're not fighting the version of you they see today. They're waging war against the version of you they know is waking up tomorrow. Because once you stop shrinking, once you stop apologizing, once you start moving like the force you were born to be, the war ends. Not because they surrendered, but because they finally realized you were never the target, you were the threat. You're not imagining the pain. You're living inside the war that starts the moment a chosen one forgets and ends the moment you remember. Why you? Why do you feel like you've always been under attack, even when you're just trying to exist? Why does it seem like no matter what you do, you never truly fit anywhere? And here's the one that keeps you up at night. Why you? You didn't ask to be different. You didn't volunteer for the loneliness, the heaviness, the spiritual cross you carry. And yet, even as a child, something in you was already awake. You noticed things others ignored, felt things others couldn't explain. You weren't just sensitive, you were tuned, like a satellite, picking up transmissions that made no sense to the people around you. Maybe it was the way you cried at things no one else cared about, or the way crowds exhausted you, like your soul couldn't breathe in places filled with noise but no truth. Maybe it was how deeply betrayal cut you, even when others told you to just get over it. You were never weak. You were wired differently. And while the world tried to label you as broken, slow, overly emotional, too intense, what you really were was marked. You weren't the first. Joseph was sold by his brothers because of a dream they couldn't understand. David was overlooked until destiny demanded the giant fall. Even Jesus was rejected in his own hometown, not because he was wrong, but because his light exposed what others didn't want to see. So if you've been asking, why me? Here's your answer. Because you were never created to be controlled. The system can only tame what it understands. And you? You've always been a question mark wrapped in fire. Too deep, too quiet, too real. And that scared them. You walked into rooms and shifted energy without saying a word. You carried truth in your silence, and your presence made liars uneasy. And they didn't know why. They still don't. Because the truth is, you weren't chosen for your resume. You were chosen because no matter how many times they tried to cage you, you wouldn't stay small. So let me ask you something. What if your pain wasn't proof of punishment, but confirmation of your positioning? What if everything that's been trying to destroy you was actually reacting to the light you're carrying? See, when the enemy can't kill you, it distracts you, makes you question your own worth, keeps you in rooms where your truth is too loud for their comfort, gaslights you into believing you're the problem. But deep down, you know. You've always known. They didn't fight you because you were flawed. They fought you because they couldn't predict you. And what can't be predicted can't be controlled. You were the glitch in the program, the anomaly they couldn't figure out, the wildfire that didn't ask for permission, and that terrified them. Because systems built on control can't survive people who remember who they are. You weren't chosen because you were perfect. You were chosen because no matter how much they tried to break you, you wouldn't stop rising. You were born to see differently, to question deeply, to walk alone. Not because you're not loved, but because few are allowed to walk where you're being sent. And here's the part that hurts the most. Sometimes, God hides his most powerful soldiers in the most painful stories. You carry what they couldn't fake. You hold what can't be taught, only remembered. So yes, the darkness came for you. And yes, it hurt, but no. It wasn't random. You were attacked because you are aligned. Your life hasn't been a mistake. It's been a strategy. Every heartbreak, every loss, every closed door, a signal, a pattern, a whisper from the divine saying, you're not like them. Stop trying to be. So let's stop pretending this is about coincidence. You've been hunted by systems because your presence exposes what they're built to hide. And when you stop doubting that, when you finally accept that maybe, just maybe, this calling is real, everything changes. You didn't come this far to be normal. You didn't survive that trauma to play safe. You didn't hear this message by accident. You've been asking, why me? And the universe is answering loud and clear, because you're the one who doesn't fold. Because when others need light, they look to you. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You are not delusional. You are wired to disrupt darkness. You didn't imagine the isolation. You didn't fabricate the pain. You're not crazy. You're not imagining the war. You're walking through it. Because you were never just another person. You are a chosen one, and they've been fighting you because of what you're about to activate. The isolation phase. Separation as sacred training. Why does it feel like the more awakened you become, the more alone you feel? Why do the rooms you used to thrive in now feel hollow, almost hostile? And why, when your soul is trying to rise, Does it seem like everyone disappears? Let's be honest. You didn't choose the silence. It chose you. It started slow. The phone stopped ringing. The invitations faded. Suddenly, people who once got you couldn't even hear you anymore. You began to withdraw, not because you were antisocial, but because your spirit could no longer breathe in shallow waters. And for a while you thought you were being punished. You thought, what did I do wrong? But what if you weren't being pushed away? What if you were being pulled higher? Let me take you to the desert. Not metaphorically, but historically. In the book of Exodus, God didn't raise Moses in the palace to lead Israel. He raised him in exile. 40 years. Not in luxury, but in obscurity, alone, hidden, misunderstood. And it was there, in the wilderness, that Moses heard the voice of God for the very first time. Not in the crowd, not in the temple, but in the quiet, at the burning bush. Because sacred things don't reveal themselves in noise. You've been calling it loneliness, but the universe has been calling it alignment. You think you've been forgotten, when in reality, you've been filtered. People didn't walk away from you, they were removed. Doors didn't close on you, they were sealed for your protection. You weren't ghosted, you were guarded. Why? Because what's growing inside you is too sacred for random access. Here's the part no one tells you. Isolation isn't punishment, it's precision. It's the space where noise dies and knowing begins, where your gifts stop hiding under applause and start sharpening in obscurity, where your soul recalibrates without interference. The silence, that wasn't absence, that was training. Because when you carry a mission that can shift atmospheres, you cannot be built in public. So now I ask you, what if your darkest, quietest nights were the very classroom God chose to whisper your calling? What if the ache in your chest wasn't abandonment, but your anointing stretching its limbs? You learned how to hear what isn't said, how to read between energy and words, how to trust your intuition when logic failed you. You were forced to grow in silence. But that silence taught you something no crowd ever could: how to walk with God, without an audience. Every chosen vessel in the Bible walked through isolation before activation. David was anointed in a field, alone before he ever stood before Goliath. Elijah heard God, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a still, small voice. Even Jesus, before miracles, before ministry, went into the wilderness. 40 days. Alone, no followers, no fans, no favor, just God and the enemy, face to face. Because isolation is where identity is tested and cemented. So maybe the next time you feel like nobody sees you, you remember that maybe, just maybe, you're not being hidden from people, you're being hidden for purpose. Because oil doesn't come from visibility, it comes from crushing. And light doesn't break through in crowds, it ignites in caves. You were never meant to carry this frequency in crowded rooms. You were always meant to be pulled back, purified, prepared in the shadows, so that when you emerge, you don't just speak, you shatter illusions. So yes, you called it loneliness, but heaven called it refinement. You called it rejection, but destiny called it realignment, because what's about to come through you requires space, requires solitude, requires depth. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. You called it loneliness, but the universe called it recalibration. And no, you were never abandoned. You were being shaped, not for the crowd, but for the calling. You are the glitch. Have you ever felt like you just don't fit, no matter how hard you try? Have you ever been in a room full of people smiling, laughing, nodding along, but deep down you knew you were never really one of them? Let me tell you something they won't. That wasn't your weakness. That was your warning signal. You were never broken. You were the interruption. The reason things have always felt off, the reason you've never truly blended in, is because you weren't designed to. You are not a malfunction. You are the glitch they've spent centuries trying to delete, but this glitch doesn't crash the system. It exposes it. Let's look back. Every empire built on illusion feared one thing, a frequency it couldn't control. Not a revolution of fists, but of remembrance. People like you, they've shown up in every era, wearing different faces, speaking different tongues, but always carrying the same disruptive signal. Nikola Tesla was one of them. He spoke to lightning. He dreamed in currents. And what happened when he tapped into something the system couldn't patent? He was erased. They called him mad, died in a hotel room, alone, broke, but never bowed. Harriet Tubman? She didn't just lead people out of slavery, she defied the grid, moving at night, guided by stars and spirit. When everyone else was obeying the system, she broke it open with silence, courage, and divine download. And Malcolm X, they didn't fear his voice, they feared his clarity. The way he pierced through lies with words sharper than steel. He was a glitch with rhythm. And they knew if he woke enough others, the program would fall. But even before them, the pattern existed. Moses wasn't chosen from the throne. He was found floating in a river, a Hebrew baby in an Egyptian world, a child raised in the palace, but wired for deliverance, not obedience. He tried to play the role, but destiny doesn't let you stay in disguise forever. The moment he saw injustice, he snapped, fled to the desert. That exile wasn't failure, it was his activation, because God always uses glitches. Ones who don't belong, can't comply, won't kneel. So now I turn the mirror to you. How many times have you been told you're too much, too loud, too intense, too emotional, too weird? How many times have you toned yourself down just to survive? You tried to blend, you got quiet, you wore masks, and still, they sensed it. That fire behind your eyes, that knowing in your silence. They couldn't name it, but they feared it, because deep down, they knew. You weren't built to fit in. You were designed to dismantle. And here's the thing, the system doesn't fight noise, it fights signal. Noise is everywhere, distractions, trends, filters. All safe, all manageable, but signal. Signal cracks the veil. Signal wakes sleepers. You are that signal. You are the glitch, not because you rebel, but because your mere existence defies the lie. So when they left you out, when they mocked you, when they called you unstable, overly deep, too intense, that wasn't rejection, that was recognition. They recognized something you hadn't even remembered yet. They saw the fire before you did, felt the voltage before you spoke, and they tried hard to smother it, not by killing your body, but by confusing your soul. Let me ask you something. What if every room you were too much for wasn't too small because of them, but too small because of what's inside you? What if your discomfort was divine? What if your disruption was intentional? What if your frequency is exactly what this broken system has been afraid of all along? You weren't created to copy. You weren't coded for compliance. You were born as a living contradiction, a walking alarm clock in a world addicted to sleep. Your soul won't shut up. Your conscience won't let you conform. Even when you try to numb it, your essence burns through. That's not malfunction. That's divine resistance. And I need you to understand something. The more you remember who you are, the more this world will try to bury you, not with bullets, but with distractions, with fear, with comparison, with applause for a version of you that stays silent. But here's the warning. If you dim that light now, you're not just hiding yourself. You're robbing the world of a frequency it can't survive without. You are not too much. You are the disruption sent on purpose. You are the reason masks fall off in rooms that once looked perfect. You are the reason someone else finally dares to question. You are the reason the script they gave you no longer works. You were never created to follow the blueprint. You are the blueprint. So no, you're not a glitch in their program. You're a reboot in motion, a reset button in a world stuck on loops, a prophetic interruption in a timeline addicted to illusion. They told you to shrink, but your energy leaked anyway. They told you to sit still, but your essence shook the walls, because you are not just energy. You are encoded disruption. And now you know. This isn't madness. This isn't rebellion. This isn't overthinking. This is awakening. You are the glitch they didn't see coming, the signal that wouldn't go silent, the light they couldn't shadow ban. You are not broken. You are the breaker. Not a malfunction, but a message. Not a mistake, but a mission. You are the glitch, and you were always meant to crash the lie. The real enemy, doubt. What if I told you that the greatest enemy you'll ever face never needed to touch you to destroy you? What if the deadliest weapon forged against your life isn't outside of you, but inside your own head? And what if the thing that's been holding you back this whole time has been whispering with your voice? They didn't have to kill your body. All they needed to do was hijack your belief system. Because here's the strategy. They couldn't stop what you are, so they taught you to doubt it. You were born with a spark, a knowing, a frequency they couldn't replicate. So rather than fight you in the light, they infected you in the dark, but with fists, not with violence, but with a seed, a single thought. You remember the first time, don't you? That moment you felt something rising in your spirit, an idea, a vision, a calling. It was real. You felt it, like heaven brushing your chest. And then, almost instantly, you're not ready. Who do you think you are? What if you're wrong? You didn't say it out loud, but it echoed, deep, familiar. And that voice, it didn't come from a stranger. It came from you. Or so you thought. Let's rewind all the way back to Eden. The serpent didn't come with a sword. He didn't shove Eve. He didn't chain Adam. He asked a question. Did God really say that was it? A sliver of uncertainty, just enough to make them doubt what they already knew. And the fallout? Catastrophic. Because doubt doesn't need to fight you. It just needs to make you question your own alignment. Now let's bring it to today. The enemy doesn't come with horns. It comes with algorithms. It comes with carefully curated distractions. It comes with childhood trauma, masked as personality traits. It comes with fake humility, the kind that convinces you that being small is being wise. Stay quiet, play it safe, let someone else lead. And you start calling it realistic. But it's not realism, it's a prison with pretty wallpaper. Because the second you believe you're unworthy, you stop showing up in your authority. And that's all the system ever wanted. Let's get honest. How many dreams have you buried under the phrase, maybe I'm not ready yet? How many times have you dimmed your light because someone looked uncomfortable? How many times have you seen truth in your spirit, but held your tongue because you didn't want to be too much? And what if I told you that every time you chose silence over authenticity, the system won, not by overpowering you, but by convincing you to overpower yourself. Doubt is not loud. It doesn't yell, it whispers, patient, calculated. It waits until you're vulnerable, until you're tired, until you're alone. And then it asks questions that sound just like you. Maybe you're imagining this. What if they laugh? What if you fail again? But here's the truth. Doubt doesn't punch you in the face. It poisons your purpose. One silent compromise at a time. So let me ask you this. If every spiritual attack you've ever faced was really a distraction from your assignment, then what part of your life have you already surrendered to doubt? What purpose did you abandon? What dream did you label unrealistic? What calling did you silence because you needed confirmation from people who were never meant to recognize you? Because here's the terrifying truth. The enemy doesn't need to defeat you. It just needs to delay you long enough for you to self-destruct. When Peter saw Jesus walking on water, he didn't sink because the storm was too strong. He sank because he doubted what he was called to do. The water held him until doubt broke the frequency. And that's exactly what happens to you. You move in faith. You step out. But when the storm screams and the voices rise, you look down and you sink. But what if the storm was never your enemy? What if the enemy was the moment you stopped believing you could walk on it? It's time to get real. The system doesn't fear your volume. It fears your clarity. Because once you're clear, once you know what you carry, once you stop asking for permission to exist, you become unshakable. And that's what they've tried to prevent since day one. So let me say it plain. You don't defeat doubt with motivation. You defeat doubt with memory. Memory of who you were before the world told you who to be. Memory of what God whispered before fear got loud. Memory of the fire in your gut that's never stopped burning, no matter how long you've been running from it. Because the enemy can mess with your timeline, but it cannot touch your identity. You want freedom? Then stop negotiating with your doubt like it's your friend. Stop treating fear like it's wisdom. Stop letting voices that never built you be the ones who limit you. You were never created to second-guess the fire inside of you. You were built to let it burn. So no, doubt. Doubt doesn't come to attack you head-on. It doesn't storm the gates. It walks in through your thoughts, dressed like reason, speaking like self-preservation, smiling like strategy. But don't be fooled. Doubt is a thief, and it steals destiny in silence. They didn't have to defeat you. They just needed you to stop believing. Because the moment you doubt your own power, you hand it to them. But now you see it. Now you hear it. And now it ends here. The remembering, when divine memory returns. Why do you sometimes know things no one taught you? Why do you feel ancient in rooms full of people still asleep? And why does your soul ache? Not from what you've experienced, but from what you can't quite remember. You didn't learn this. You're remembering. You're not discovering who you are. You're recalling it somewhere deep inside you. Buried beneath the trauma, the noise, the programming, there's a code, not just in your mind, but in your blood. That knowing you've had since childhood, the one that made you feel alien, disconnected, strangely aware of things no one else seemed to see. It wasn't delusion. It wasn't imagination. It was the first spark of remembrance. Because when you were born, you didn't arrive as a blank slate. You arrived carrying layers of memory. Your soul is old. Your DNA holds more than biology. It holds blueprints, ancestral intelligence, spiritual assignments you made long before this lifetime. There are echoes inside you. You've felt them in dreams, in synchronicities, in moments of deja vu, so powerful it made your skin crawl. That's not random. That's frequency realignment. You're not just living a life. You're walking through a prophecy that began before you breathed. Let me tell you a story. Not a parable, but a pattern. In ancient Hebrew tradition, there's a concept called zakah. It means to remember. But not just mentally, spiritually. To zakah is to call back what was always yours. Moses didn't become chosen the day he saw the burning bush. He remembered he was chosen. Esther didn't wake up a queen. She stepped into the knowing that she was placed in that palace for such a time as this. You think this is new, but this remembrance is generational. You've heard it, haven't you? That inner pull that doesn't go away, the one that calls you to deeper waters, asks you to question everything, whispers things in your spirit that make no sense to your logic. You've tried to silence it, tried to pray it away, tried to fit into a version of life that made others comfortable, but it keeps coming back. Stronger, clearer. That's not anxiety, that's ancestral memory. Waking up. Modern science tells us DNA stores memory across generations, not just physical traits, but trauma, instinct, intuition. But what they don't say out loud is that DNA doesn't just remember fear. It remembers frequency. It remembers truth. It remembers prophecy. It remembers who you are. This is why you felt disconnected. Why normal never satisfied you. Why you could never quite explain what was wrong. Only that everything felt off. You weren't malfunctioning. You were waiting for the signal. And now, that signal is reaching you, not through a textbook, not through a church pew, but through awakening. You're not getting inspired, you're being recalibrated. Every time you hear a word, a sound, a story that makes your body light up, that's not inspiration, that's recognition. That's your DNA saying, yes, this is part of the code. And here's the part they don't want you to hear. You don't need to be taught. You need to be triggered. Your soul isn't waiting for permission, it's waiting for activation. Because once memory returns, obedience to the false system dies, and when that happens, you become dangerous. What are you remembering right now? That you were never meant to blend in? That your pain wasn't random, but refinement? That your longing, your intensity, your rebellion weren't flaws, but frequency alignments? What if that dream you can't let go of is a relic from a life your soul already lived? What if your gifts didn't come from this life, but came through it? Even in Scripture, God says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Jeremiah 1:5. He didn't say, I created you first. He said, I knew you. That means you existed. Before the body, before the breath, you were a thought in the mind of the divine. And now, you're not learning your purpose, you're remembering it. And yes, it hurts, because remembering who you are requires shedding who you were trained to be. You'll grieve your old self. You'll lose people, you'll lose comfort, but what you gain is clarity, and clarity breaks chains. Let me be clear, the system survives on your amnesia. Your forgetfulness is its fuel, because when you remember, you stop obeying rules designed to keep you small. You stop asking for validation. You stop apologizing for your light. You stop performing. And when you do, you crack the matrix open. You're not here to be taught how to be powerful. You're here to remember that you already are. You don't need a title. You don't need a following. You don't need more time. You need to return to your own frequency. So if this is resonating, If you're sitting there, heart pounding, breath shifting, truth swelling in your gut, that's not emotion, that's recognition. You're not becoming, you're remembering. Because you don't carry wisdom from this world, you carry fire from a time before time, and now that fire is waking up. You didn't learn this. You've been carrying it all along. You're not being enlightened, you're being realigned. And the moment you accept that, you stop being a student of truth and become the embodiment of it. The rejection code. Every wound was a seal. What if your worst wounds weren't accidents, but instructions? What if the betrayals weren't meant to break you, but to mark you? And what if every time you were rejected, the universe wasn't saying no, it was saying not them? You weren't just hurt, you were encoded. You didn't just survive, you were sealed. You weren't damaged, you were drafted. But no one told you this, because if you ever realized what your pain actually meant, you'd become a walking frequency that fractures every lie they ever fed you. Let's walk back through your story. Start with childhood. The rejection you felt from the very people who were supposed to love you, the way your intuition was dismissed, the way you were told you were too emotional, too sensitive, too much. That wasn't random. That was targeted disorientation. The system tried to teach you early, don't trust what's inside, don't speak what you see, don't feel what you feel. It wasn't trying to protect you, it was trying to erase the original code. In the Bible, the prophet Jeremiah says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." But here's the part we don't talk about. Being set apart always feels like abandonment at first. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers. He didn't just get sold into slavery, he was betrayed by his own blood. But that betrayal, it didn't stop his calling. It activated it, because sometimes the betrayal is the portal. Let's break this down, not philosophically, but spiritually. 1. Rejection. It wasn't personal. You were carrying a vibration too disruptive for people who'd built their identity around illusions. So they pushed you away. Because your very presence was a mirror, and they didn't like what it reflected. 2. Abandonment. You weren't left behind. You were strategically isolated. Why? Because your voice needed to be shaped in silence, not in noise. 3. Heartbreak. They didn't love you wrong because you were unworthy. They loved you wrong because they couldn't match what you carried. That ache in your chest? It wasn't proof of failure, it was proof that you were awakening beyond emotional dependency. 4. Betrayal. This one stings the deepest, because it always comes from someone close. But understand, betrayal is always prophetic. Judas didn't stop Jesus. He triggered the crucifixion. You don't realize it yet, but every wound is encrypted with information. Every scar is a signature from the divine, and those who hurt you, they became unknowing carriers of a spiritual technology. They delivered the exact kind of trauma that would awaken the exact kind of power sleeping inside you. This isn't just poetry, this is coding. Pain is how the soul remembers its fire. Let me ask you something raw. What if the very thing you've been trying to heal from is the very thing that makes you dangerous to the system? What if God didn't save you from the fire because he built you in the fire? And what if that ache you can't medicate, can't shake, can't ignore, is not damage, but divine memory surfacing? They told you healing would come when the pain stopped. No. Real healing starts when you understand the pain. When you stop asking, why did they do this to me? and start asking, what was this pain designed to awaken in me? Because here's what they don't want you to know. You weren't just hurt. You were instructed. You were marked, not for death, for destiny. This is the cost of being chosen. Your life won't be linear. Your timeline won't make sense. Your pain will often precede your clarity, but that's not dysfunction. That's how souls like yours are trained, because the only ones who can truly liberate are the ones who've had to liberate themselves. You want proof that you're chosen? Look at what you've survived. Others folded under what you walked through. Others drowned in what you swam through. Others silenced themselves. You kept coming back. That's not personality. That's programming. That's what it means to be encoded for impact. So let me tell you the truth they tried to bury. You weren't wounded. You were sealed. Your heartbreak was a rite of passage. Your silence was a sacred assignment. Your abandonment was divine redirection. You weren't discarded. You were distilled. You weren't punished. You were prepared. And the pain didn't poison you. It printed the map to your next elevation. So now what? What do you do with all of this pain? Now that you know it wasn't random, you stop trying to delete it. You start decoding it. You stop looking at your scars like reminders of who hurt you, and start seeing them as reminders of what you carry. Because once you stop blaming the pain, you unlock the power inside it. You were never broken. You were being blueprinted. The betrayal, a transmission. The rejection, a redirect. The silence, a setup for signal. Every trauma wasn't a test to destroy you. It was a divine strategy to activate you. So no, you weren't hurt. You were chosen in code. You didn't just survive the fire, you became the fire. And now that you've decoded the pain, you no longer carry it. You command it. The fire, they thought you were finished. Have you ever been so deep in the dark, you forgot what light even felt like? Have you ever hit a point so low, you didn't want to be saved, you just wanted it to stop? And then, somehow, you woke up, not healed, not whole, but awake. Let me say it clearly. You don't learn about the storm. You become it. Because survival isn't gentle. It doesn't come with applause or comfort. It comes with scars, silence, fire still burning inside a chest that shouldn't even be breathing. You don't just get through some seasons. You die in them. And then, if you're chosen, you rise. There was a night, not metaphorically, I mean a night, a real one, when everything collapsed, when the people I loved left, when my own thoughts turned on me, when I begged heaven to speak and all I heard was my own sobbing in the dark. That wasn't depression, that wasn't rock bottom, that was the void. And what they never tell you about the void is this: it doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. I fell, not physically, spiritually, like a free fall through silence and shame, through memories that haunted, through voices that lied. And when I hit the floor, the ground didn't catch me. The fire did. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It burned away everything that wasn't me. Imagine this, a cavern beneath your own soul. The sound of your heartbeat echoing like thunder in a dead world. No light, no map. Just a flicker inside your chest. The one thing the fire couldn't consume. That flicker, that's purpose. And when everything else died, purpose remained. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They were thrown into the fire for not bowing down. And the fire didn't kill them. It revealed a fourth figure walking with them. Because here's the truth. If you're truly chosen, God doesn't pull you out of the fire. He joins you in it. The storm isn't a test of faith. It's where you meet it. So here's my question. What if your breakdown was never about breaking you, but about burning off the costume you were forced to wear? What if the darkness wasn't rejection, but refinement? What if your lowest point was the exact depth needed for your light to finally break through? They thought it was over when you disappeared, when you stopped posting, when you stopped answering. They said you gave up. They didn't realize you weren't quitting. You were molting. You weren't destroyed. You were redefining. Because you can't carry light through old skin. You don't bring resurrection power through a reputation. You bring it through rebirth. Let me say something to every storm you've ever faced. You didn't just survive it. You absorbed it. And now it lives inside you. The rage, the fire, the clarity, the stillness. You're not just walking out of the storm. This is the evolution they never saw coming. You went in shattered. You came out coded. You went in begging for mercy. You came out a weapon of light. You were never meant to be who you were before the storm. That version of you was too polite for what's coming next. Now, you're forged. You're clear. You're dangerous. Not because you fight, but because you remember. And I know you feel it. That part of you that doesn't flinch the same way anymore, that doesn't crave approval the way it used to, that doesn't explain your truth to people who never had the capacity to carry it. That's the fire, still inside you, still holy, still untouched. And let me be real. They won't recognize you anymore. Good, they weren't supposed to. Because when you rise from the ashes, you don't come back for validation. You come back for alignment. You don't carry pain. You carry prophecy. So next time someone says, "You've changed," look them in the eye and say, "No, I died. And what came back doesn't fit into who you remember. You didn't study the storm. You became it. And now when you walk, the ground remembers. The wind recognizes, and every demon that tried to drown you backs up when they hear your footsteps. Because fire doesn't fear fire. And you are the fire. The call to rise. If not now, when? If not now, then when? If not you, then who? And if not this moment, how many more wake-up calls do you think you'll get before your soul stops answering? You've felt it. That pressure in your chest, that pulse behind your thoughts, that ache in your bones like time itself is pulling you forward. You keep saying, "I just need a little more clarity. I'll move once I feel more confident." Soon. Not yet. Maybe later. But let's be real. The delay is costing you alignment. The hesitation is leaking destiny. And the silence? That silence is a prison you're too powerful to stay in. Remember that moment you knew you were supposed to speak, but didn't? That time you had a vision burning in your chest, but stayed silent out of fear. That connection you were supposed to follow, but ghosted because you doubted your worth? That wasn't self-protection. That was self-abandonment. And it ends now. Let's look back. Esther didn't wait for the perfect plan. She stepped into the fire because her people were dying, and her soul said, "Now or never." David didn't train for years to fight Goliath. He showed up with what he had. A sling, a stone, and a fire in his chest that said, "This is the moment." Moses didn't feel ready. He argued with God at the burning bush, but heaven didn't care about his stutter. It cared about his alignment. So here's the real question. What are you still waiting for? Another sign? This is your sign. More time? Time is not loyal to hesitation. Other first? Someone else to go first. There is no one else. You are the blueprint. You are the breaker of cycles. You are the one your ancestors dreamed would survive the storm. And now that you're breathing, what will you do with that breath? Chosen ones aren't called when it's easy. They're summoned when the system is cracking. And guess what? The cracks are showing. Can't you feel it? Everything fake is falling. Everything hidden is rising. Everything shallow is shattering under the pressure of divine truth. And you're not here to blend in. You're here to be the rupture. This message right now isn't just content. It's code. Every word is a frequency. Every sentence a mirror. Every pause a door. So don't just watch this. Respond, not with applause, with alignment, with action, with yes. So here's what you do right now. This is not about likes. This is not about views. This is activation. Comment 777 below, not because it's trendy, because it's a signal to the algorithm. But more than that, a signal to the universe that you're awake now, that you're ready now, that the spell of delay is broken. And when you comment, others will see it, and it will remind them. Because frequency travels, energy transmits, and this is the ripple. Share this video, not to go viral, but to go vertical. This isn't marketing, this is spiritual momentum. You have no idea who's sitting in silence right now, aching for a word that breaks the illusion. You could be the one who sends it. You could be the reason they remember. Because this movement isn't about audience, it's about alignment. And if you've made it this far, you don't need more proof. You are the movement. Let every excuse burn here. I'm not ready. Gone. What if I fail? Irrelevant. I'm afraid of what they'll say. They already talked. And you already survived it. So now. If not now, then when? You were never sent here to be passive. You were sent here to interrupt timelines, to walk into generational wounds and say, it ends with me. To look into mirrors that used to terrify you and say, I'm back, and I remember who I am, and to stand on the ashes of who you used to be and scream, this fire didn't kill me, it activated me. So I'll ask one last time, if not now, then when? If this message lit something inside you, drop 777. Like this video to amplify the energy. Share it to send the signal. Don't do it for vanity. Do it for vibration. Because once the chosen activate, the illusion cracks and the real world begins. The chain reaction. Every step cracks the system. Have you ever wondered why they fight you so hard before you even fully rise? Why certain people attack you before you've even said a word? Why the world feels like it bends sideways when you finally take one step toward your truth? It's not coincidence, it's physics. It's spiritual law. Because when a chosen one moves in alignment, systems shake. Every time you take a step in your real frequency, a lie somewhere collapses. Every time you speak with unfiltered clarity, a shadow loses control over someone still trapped. Every time you rise from something meant to kill you, a crack forms in the matrix. You're not just walking, you're transmitting. Let me tell you a story. Not ancient, not metaphorical, yours. That moment you decided to finally stop dimming your light, when you said, I can't live like this anymore. When you stopped trying to explain your calling to people committed to misunderstanding you. That decision didn't just affect you, it created a domino. because someone watched you reclaim your fire and suddenly their excuses didn't feel as safe. Their cage started to feel too small. They didn't tell you. They never thanked you. But that one act of truth shook their prison walls. Remember Paul and Silas? They weren't just imprisoned, they were chained, and when they began to praise in the dark, the earth shook. But here's the secret nobody teaches. It wasn't just their chains that fell. The entire prison opened. Others who didn't sing, who didn't praise, who didn't even believe, walked free too. Because when one chosen one vibrates at full truth, the frequency frees more than just them. You are not just energy. You are intelligence on assignment. Your frequency carries data. Every time you align with it, a spiritual ping goes out. A signal. That signal pierces layers, through shame, through trauma, through time, and when it hits another soul, the code begins to crack open in them too. It's not about influence, it's about initiation. This is what the system fears. Not your volume, not your aesthetic, not your success. They fear your alignment, because once you move correctly, they lose grip, not just on you, but on everyone watching you. You are the first domino. You don't have to go viral to shift timelines. You just have to vibrate true. One step in obedience becomes a shockwave. It moves silently. Through families, through bloodlines, through spiritual atmospheres built on fear and false. That's why the fight intensifies when you start moving right. Because your walk is not private, it's a broadcast. Let me ask you, what if your healing isn't just for you? What if your rising isn't just personal? What if your alignment is someone else's answer? Every time you forgive, chains fall off your lineage. Every time you say yes to the voice within, someone else's silence cracks. You've been told you're just one person, but that's a lie fed to those with revolutionary DNA. Because in the spirit realm, one person aligned equals many freed. So the next time you hesitate, the next time you wonder if speaking, moving, stepping, choosing differently is worth it, remember this. When you walk in your frequency, a shackle breaks on someone who doesn't even know you exist. You're not just a person, you're a chain reaction. You're not just healing, you're a wave of light. So, walk. Even if your voice shakes, even if they don't understand, even if you're still figuring it out, because every single step you take in truth cracks something ancient and frees something sacred. The seal. You didn't come to adapt, you came to reshape. How long will you keep trying to shrink into systems that were never built to hold your fire? How many more rooms will you contort yourself to fit into, knowing deep down your light makes the walls tremble? How much longer will you pretend you were sent here to adjust, when every cell in your being is screaming that you came here to disrupt? Let's stop lying to ourselves. You didn't come here to fit in. You didn't come here to be palatable. You didn't come here to be liked. You came here to break patterns, to interrupt the lineage of silence, to carry a code so piercing, so pure, it exposes everything built on illusion. That discomfort you feel, that friction, it's not dysfunction, it's divine collision. Because frequency like yours wasn't designed for comfort. It was forged for confrontation. Look at history. No prophet ever fit in. No liberator was ever welcomed. No revolutionary was ever invited to the table. Moses wasn't given a map. He was given a staff. Esther didn't get applause. She got a choice. Jesus wasn't crowned for his message, he was crucified for it. But what happened next? Resurrection, redemption, So don't let comfort trick you into forgetting. You're not a follower of trends, you're a transmitter of truth. And here's the part no one ever told you. You were never hard to love. You were just hard to manipulate. You were never too intense. Your frequency just short-circuited their programming. They called you too sensitive, because your spirit was always tuned into a higher signal. They said you didn't belong, because you were never meant to belong here. You didn't come to adapt, you came to reshape. So now that you remember, now that the veil is gone, now that your silence has turned into thunder in your bones, you can't go back, you won't go back. Because the moment you remembered who you were, you became irreversible. And every step you take now, every truth you speak, every boundary you hold, breaks something ancient, heals something ancestral, builds something eternal. You don't need their permission, you never did. You are not waiting for the world to understand you, the world is waiting for you to fully show up. So no more crawling, no more code sublimating, no more shrinking your voice to survive in shallow waters. That version of you, the one who played small to stay safe, it's gone, buried, and from the ashes a new one rises, the one who remembers, the one who carries fire in their chest and speaks like thunder from heaven. You didn't come to adapt, you came to reshape. So don't curl back in, it's time to walk into the light. You remember now, now move.